crossed the threshold of offering ultrasounds. It's exciting for me to be your keynote speaker this evening. There have been some things on my heart that I've wanted to share with you for a couple of years, and I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to do that with you this evening. Some of you have known me for quite a while, and some of you I'm meeting for the first time tonight. Like many of you, I'm an immigrant to San Francisco. My husband Matthew and I moved here 8 years ago, but I have to be honest with you. When we first came here, I wasn't really sure that I loved living in the city. Yet, the Lord has turned my heart 180 degrees. Seriously, how could a person not love living here? Just recently, a missionary visiting my church said he chose to spend his furlough in San Francisco because it's the best place in the world. And I'm sure all of you can think of many reasons that he's right. Every tongue, tribe, and nation are represented in our city. There are delicious restaurants every place you look. We're surrounded by beauty with the ocean, the bay, and the Golden Gate Bridge. And the Giants win the World Series every other year. I knew that would get you guys. San Francisco is really a wonderful city. But it's actually none of those things that sealed my love for this city. So tonight I'll be sharing with you what the Lord has done to bring me to this city and to give me a love for San Francisco and its people. God runs my life, not me. He's given me experiences that I never would have chosen if life were a multiple choice activity book. I didn't think you'd like that. Thank you. But I see that He's carried me over great thresholds and that His plans are always best. Tonight, as I'm telling you parts of my story, you'll get to hear about how God has redeemed my life. There are other people in the story who've also been redeemed, but I don't have the opportunity to tell you about that this evening. From hearing about my story, you'll get to see a pretty full picture of the lives that our clients live and the circumstances that many of the women we serve come to us from. You'll also hear about the hope that is offered through our ministry. And you'll be given ways that you can respond to the needs of women and families in our city. My story might be similar to some of yours. I know that it's very similar to many of our clients because I am an Alpha Pregnancy Center client. Almost 8 years ago, like I said, my husband Matthew and I moved here from Cincinnati, where we're both from. Actually, Matthew's from Cincinnati, and I'm from a small town north of there that my grandma calls Hamilton, Ohio. My parents were good church-going folk. They were youth leaders, church camp counselors, they had 2 cute kids. They were everything that a young Christian couple is supposed to be. My dad built my mom's dream house from hand, and my brother and I built our own bedrooms. Shortly after we moved into that house, there was a day that I got sick at school, and my mother was called to pick me up. When she arrived, she was kind of angry with me and told me we had to go to her friend's house. At his house, I was told to stay upstairs so that the 2 of them could go downstairs to talk. As I waited, I got sick again. And little 3rd grade me just wanted to go home. So I went downstairs to tell my mom. and found her in bed with her friend. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew that it was wrong. When my brother got home from school that day, I told him what I saw. And being an 8th grade boy, he knew what was going on. So he told my dad, and that began my parents' 5-year divorce and custody battle. My brother and I chose to live with my dad, and despite losing our dream house and our secure lifestyle, my dad faithfully took us to church. And that year, I decided to get baptized. I know at the time, I believed in Christ and his resurrection, but I'm not sure that I was really turning my life over to him and making him the Lord of my life. I knew that I was doing what I had been taught was right. While I lived with my dad, I spent one night a week at my mom's house. Over the years, I saw her be incredibly generous and forgiving to men who repeatedly abused her and took advantage of her. There were many times that the fighting between my mom and her boyfriends would become so bad, so violent, that I would go in her backyard to climb a tree so that I could feel safe. I was so young that I didn't know what was happening was abnormal or wrong. And I didn't think I needed to tell anyone. And I never told anyone. But God always protected me, and none of her boyfriends ever hurt me. By the time I was 12, my dad began dating someone. And I never liked her, and she never liked me. To start with, she smoked cigarettes and played darts. And at 12 years old, I thought that made her a cousin to the devil. Through a variety of unfortunate circumstances, she and her 2 daughters wound up living with us. She and my father argued frequently, and there were many times during those arguments that she would threaten to hurt me. One night, by the protection of the Holy Spirit, I woke up suddenly, and I saw her standing next to my bed, holding a large kitchen butcher knife in her hand. When I asked her what she was doing, she said, "Oh, I'm just turning off your radio." And again, God protected my life. Not too long after that, she and her daughters moved out of our house. 3 pretty major things happened my freshman year of high school. I went on my first trip, my first mission trip to Mexico with my youth group, and I had my first opportunity to see what life was like outside of Hamilton, Ohio. From that point forward, I went on some sort of mission trip every single year. And I feel like I'm still on a mission trip here in San Francisco. It's kind of a lifelong mission trip. Also, that summer, like every summer, I went to church camp. And that summer, like every summer, I had a church camp boyfriend. But this time, it was different. I thought that I had found the love of a lifetime. We lived more than an hour apart, so we convinced our parents to change churches, and we began going to a church halfway between our homes. Don't do that if you're a parent. We also managed to convince our parents to let us spend the weekends at one another's homes. And that obviously couldn't have led to good things. Now, I had attended True Love Waits rallies with my youth group. And church the value of saving sex for marriage. And I was committed to being a virgin until my wedding. My boyfriend told me he had the same commitment. But we frequently put ourselves in compromising situations. I would always tell him to stop. I would seem to be just the nick of time. In the spring of my freshman year of high school, there was a time that he refused to stop. I repeatedly asked him to stop, but he refused. It took me 5 years to ever tell anyone that he raped me. I was afraid it was my fault and that I'd be in trouble for what I willingly allowed. A couple of days after he raped me, he told me that if I wasn't willing to have sex with him, he'd break up with me because there were plenty of girls at his own school that were willing. And that's what happened. I thought I had been ruined and couldn't be redeemed or pure again. I felt abandoned, dirty, ashamed, and depressed. And this depression caused me to think that my whole life was worthless. And I began to dwell on the many pains that I had experienced. My dream life from childhood was gone. I vividly recalled my mom leaving our family to be with men who abused her and put my safety in danger by allowing me to be around such violent men. My father compromised my safety with his girlfriend living with us, and then failed to set wise boundaries for my relationships. And then this boyfriend, the one person that I thought actually loved me, rejected me for doing what was right, for doing what I had learned at church. For weeks, I focused on those things. And in May of 1994, I decided I didn't want to live any longer. There was a night that I was home by myself and found a bottle of pills in our medicine cabinet. I swallowed every one of them, hoping to die. I sat on my bathroom floor that night and replayed my life and all of my most painful moments like a horror movie in my head caught on repeat. At the scene when I went to church, I asked God where he was. I thought, if God was real, he would show up in my bathroom and comfort me. And that is what happened. I felt the presence of the Lord like a thick, calming blanket. I could hear him speak to my heart that he would protect me. He would never leave me or abandon me. His love for me would never fail. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace and I felt hope. But I had already swallowed a bottle of pills. So I told God, thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here in my darkest hour. I'm going to go to bed now. And if I wake up tomorrow, I'll live for you. And that's what happened. The next day, I woke up a brand new person. I had been given new life. My wounded heart had been made whole. It wasn't a fairy tale change. I didn't live happily ever after, but I lived differently. I knew I had been saved from death. I knew the creator of the world is for me, and therefore no one can be against me. I knew my life had purpose. and I was pursuing that purpose with all of my energy. I joined a high school drama group that dealt with the issue of teen suicide and presented Christ as our ultimate hope. I went on several mission trips to Venezuela, Mexico, and Haiti. I went to a Christian college and volunteered with middle school students in the inner city. I led a Bible study for high school girls in the suburbs of Cincinnati. I spent 1 year teaching English at a Christian English immersion school in Haiti, and then gave 2 years of my life to students in China while teaching there. The Lord used me and those experiences to bring dozens of people into His family, into His kingdom, making disciples and seeing lives transformed. But just because I was made new and had new purpose did not mean everything was easy. In the year 2000, the Lord began doing some deeper restoration in my heart, and I began seeing a counselor for the trauma in my life when I was a child. My relationship with my mother was restored. In the spring of 2001, my mother decided to kick her abusive boyfriend out of her home. But that June, he broke into her house, took a baseball bat, and beat her to death. I went through deep grief with the sudden and brutal loss of my mother. Weeks later, when I was cleaning out her house, her neighbors came by to express their condolences. And during that conversation, they told me the night that my mother was killed, they could hear her crying for help from her house. But they didn't want to be nosy, so they didn't respond. At that moment, I developed a deep resolve to never ignore the cries of those who need my help. During that time of grief, I sincerely connected with the Apostle Paul saying that for me to die is gain, but to live is Christ. The purpose of sharing eternal life with as many people as possible is what kept me moving forward. And then, about a year later, I met Mr. ABC, Matthew Ronan. And the Lord's plan to bring us here together was set in motion. Matthew and I had a long-distance relationship for 2 years while I was teaching in China. And Matthew showed me a kind of selfless love that clearly imitated Christ and brought me home to Ohio so that we could be married. While I was serving in China, Matthew was being called to San Francisco. And the Lord confirmed that call for both of us in countless ways. So 4 months after our wedding, we gave away everything we owned and drove west to San Francisco. I had lined up a job, and we were called to seek the welfare of this city, just as it's expressed in Jeremiah 29. Our whole 3-week drive across the country, I was really motion sick. But for me, that's pretty normal because I get motion sick on my 12-minute drive to church every Sunday. We arrived in the city 3 days before my job was supposed to start, and we're staying on the living room floor of a friend of a friend. On the day my job was supposed to start, I called my boss and said, "Hey, I'm here, I'm ready to get started," and was told that my job was no longer available, which meant my housing was no longer available, my health care was no longer available, and the plan that we had set up for provision was crumbling. Also that day, It started to bother me that after 3 days, my motion sickness hadn't yet gone away. The people we were staying with had recently had a baby, and the mom said, "Chastity, I don't think that that's motion sickness. I think it's morning sickness. You should take a pregnancy test and find out." So I took the test, and it was positive. I was gripped with fear. I questioned why God would bring us here and give us a baby that we couldn't take care of and then take away our plan for provision. I remember going to Target and walking through the baby aisle and just crying when I saw how much cribs cost, thinking there is no way that we can take care of a baby. That's my friend Louise. Throughout my pregnancy, despite my strong Christian upbringing and my strong Christian faith, as one to offer help rather than to receive. And the comfort that he had given me during my pregnancy, I now get the pleasure of giving to women like Mary Chris. The stories that I've shared with you tonight about my life are the stories that we hear every day from the women who come in to Alpha Pregnancy Center. Many of them are from broken homes. They've been abused. They're struggling financially. They feel alone and desperate. And then to top it all off, they find out they're pregnant. And we meet them right where they're at. Just a couple of weeks ago, our nurse, Ronan, was walking into work. As Ronan waited at the crosswalk to cross the street, she saw a man run up behind a woman, grab her by the hair, throw her to the ground, and begin beating her. The people that were nearby on the sidewalk just stepped back so that they didn't have to be involved. By the time Ronan got across the street, the woman had fled, but the man was still pacing the sidewalk. Ronan came into the office and told me what happened. I asked her to lock the door, and I went outside to see if I could find the woman. I first went to the people on the sidewalk and said, "Did any of you call the police?" And they all said, "Oh, no, we didn't do anything." I went into the liquor store that was right next to where the attack had happened and asked them what they did. They said, "We heard someone crying, but we didn't want to get involved." I went to the gas station next door, and that's where I found Nakia. The manager of the gas station had given Nakia a paper towel so that she could clean her face, but was ushering Nakia out of the gas station. I asked, "Did you call the police?" And they said, "No." I said, "Nakia, do you want someone to call the police?" And she said, "Yes, please." So I told Nakia she could come with me to our office and we would call the police. The whole time Nakia's phone had been buzzing over and over and over. She said, "Chastity, I'm scared to go outside." I said, "Don't worry, I'm with you. We'll be all right." So we walked to Alpha. I gave Nakia the phone, and she called the police. While she was speaking to the police, she read from her cell phone the text messages that she had been receiving from her ex-boyfriend, which said, "Don't come out of the gas station. I'm waiting for you with a knife, and if I see you, I will kill you." At that point, we locked the door while we waited for the police. Nakia shared with me that that was one of multiple public attacks that her ex-boyfriend had inflicted upon her. But that was the first time that anyone offered to help her. Nakia also shared with me that she had recently found out she was pregnant. She told me the night that she told her boyfriend she was pregnant, he pushed her out of bed and began kicking her stomach, trying to kill her baby. And this is what we're facing every day. There's so much social pressure to just get rid of the problem. Nakia's story, and Mary Chris's story, and my story are really common stories. In the USA, half of all pregnancies are unplanned. Nationwide, 1/3 of women have abortions, but here in San Francisco, it's more like half of women having abortions. In our city every year, we have 16,000 children born, but we have 18,000 abortions. We kill more children than we let be born, and we call it a woman's right to choose. In Proverbs 24, we're told to rescue those being led away to death, to hold back those staggering toward a slaughter. But if you say, "We knew nothing about this," does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who guards your life know it? And will he not repay everyone according to what they have done? Each day in our city, there are 50 children killed because of abortion. And we cannot ignore their cries. At Alpha, we ask, why does this happen? And we respond to the reason that women choose abortion. Last year, 850 women found Alpha Pregnancy Center to be the place in San Francisco that would meet their needs. One of our supporters says that we're not just a pro-life ministry, but we're a pro-human ministry. Understanding where women come from helps us to respond to all of their needs. We're not putting just one little Band-Aid on one of their many wounds. Like Mary Chris shared with you, we're able to give diapers and formula and supplies, clothing, cribs, car seats, strollers, high chairs. If you have those in your garage, you can donate them to us. We are able to give education. We offer 8 classes to help the families we serve learn to raise their children in safe and loving homes. We offer case management to help people with things like writing resumes, looking for jobs, looking for health care, finding childcare, and making sure that they can be stable so that they don't have to work in gambling halls or do things worse than that to get money to take care of their children. We offer pregnancy tests and life-affirming pregnancy options counseling. And we're the only place in San Francisco that has an ongoing, year-round, post-abortion healing group. We call it a HOPE group, Healing of Post-Abortion Emotions. Previously, at past banquets, I've been able to share with you that those services working together have given us an 85% success rate with the moms that we see choosing life for their children. But in November, we started our ultrasound program. And it is such a joy to tell you that just like Mary Chris, every mother who has received an ultrasound from us since that time has left our center intending to choose life for her child. We now have In February, babies that come to the center every week. They'll take care of them. You heard Mary Chris say that during her pregnancy, multiple times she had an abortion scheduled. But God used Alpha and our ultrasound program to protect both Mary Chris and Tristan from that pain. And we're so thrilled as we consider the possibilities, as we seek the welfare of our wonderful city. I have, and this ministry has, accepted the call from God to respond to the cries of those being led away to a slaughter. We will not ignore the 18,000 children killed every year in our city, and we're inviting you to join us in that response. We look forward to the day that I can stand here and report to you there were no abortions in San Francisco. That each one of God's masterpieces knit together right here in our city were given the opportunity to live. That can seem like a really daunting task. But God is bigger than large numbers. He's bigger than the fears that women face. And He's bigger than the barriers that will stop us from that. In the years to come, we're hoping to replicate this success. Imagine what God could do if we had the funding to have centers throughout the city, in Bayview, Fillmore, North Beach, the Sunset District. But none of that can happen without your support. Alpha Pregnancy Center receives no government funding, and all of our services are free. We're totally dependent upon the contributions that you choose to give. As I was preparing to speak to you about the need our city has to respond, for God's people to rise up and to speak up for children in the womb, I was at the same time reading through the book of Nehemiah and struck by the similarity of our situation to Nehemiah's situation. If you remember, in Nehemiah's time, Jerusalem was crumbling and falling apart, and he felt the Lord calling him to restore his city. He first went to the leaders, who then brought together God's people, and in just 52 days, the wall around the city was rebuilt, and the people were spiritually renewed. Each person took responsibility for the area near their own home. They were under attack, but they obeyed God. They were steadfast and determined. They knew their purpose, and their city was restored. Together, we have the opportunity to restore San Francisco to be a place where God's people understand the value of life and take action to protect it. But right now, our city has 7 abortion clinics, and we are one of only 2 places that offer an alternative to abortion. However, it is completely attainable to reach every single abortion-vulnerable woman in this city. Last year, with $175,000, 1 location, 2 staff members, and a handful of dedicated volunteers, 850 women found what they needed at Alpha Pregnancy Center to care for their families. Approximately $1,200 for each life that we protect. But our only source of funds is what you give. There is a direct correlation between the amount of money raised and the lives that can be impacted. Seeking the welfare of our city, San Francisco, is not just a call to me and Matthew. It's a call to to everyone in this room. Each of you here tonight are the leaders that we're coming to, asking you to rebuild this city. I'm asking you to hear the cries of the women in the houses and apartments next door to you and respond. I'm inviting you to speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. When Matthew and I left Cincinnati 8 years ago, I never imagined that I would be leading this ministry and leading a team of people that in 6 years have saved over 500 lives, but that's what happened. And now, you're here, and I'm asking you to do the same. You can volunteer like Phyllis. You can be the person who makes a weekly phone call, or gives groceries, or hands a package of diapers. You can volunteer in our office. You can volunteer on our board. There are so many ways that you could use your time to respond. And tonight we're giving you the opportunity to respond financially. It takes $100 a month to save a life. Can you place a value on Tristan's life? Isn't that worth more than $100? Tonight, can you save a life? Can you save 5 or 10? I believe there are people in this room tonight that could, without blinking, give $1,000 a month. And just like Mary Chris said, God can change the direction of the land. The course of our city can be rerouted. As I leave you tonight, there are 3 things I want you to remember. The first is that there are many, many stories of people just like me, just like Mary Chris, just like Nakia, who have found themselves in crisis and turmoil. In San Francisco, every year, 18,000 times, a woman will make the decision to end the life of her child because she can't imagine a viable alternative. Seeking the welfare of our city means helping its people. The second thing is that people can find peace, hope, and loving options in the midst of their pain. I am living proof of that. And in 2013, there were 850 other women who are living proof of that. And lastly, we need your help. It's an urgent time. We cannot close our ears or step back or look away. We can't ignore, I can't, you can't ignore the cries of those who are being led away to a slaughter. We're totally dependent upon your generous contributions. Tonight I'm asking you to be a watchman on the wall and to stand with us to respond to the cries of those who need our help.